Hi! In this video, I'm going to explore some foundations for building and running a solo tabletop role-playing game, particularly Numenera via the Cypher System. There are all sorts of ways to run a tabletop role-playing game on your own, without a group of people, but while there are games designed for solo play, the campaign I'm interested in running as a solo project aspires to stick to the Numenera and Cypher System rulebooks as much as possible. I'm not looking to simulate the experience of playing with friends around a table, or simulate a GM. Instead, my hope is to take the rules, as close to as written as possible, and run them on my own with minimal to no house rules. This approach will be experimental, so some concepts might change. Also, while this new video and new Infinite Construct project focuses on solo play, the principles here will still help you play and build a Numenera character, whether you're playing alone or with people. But before we get into the characters, let's start with some general considerations for how this approach to playing solo will even work. My approach isn't to simulate the experience of playing with others, but is instead focused on finding ways to enjoy books and rules on your own and at your own pace. While playing with a group of friends is always preferred, playing on your own can be a great way to supplement your current gaming experiences, and it's a solid opportunity to learn the rules and lore of a world too, all at your own pace and all at your own time, and within the context of a game. Playing a narrative role-playing game solo might also just sound like writing fiction, and it kind of is. The difference here, though, compared to writing fiction, is that there's a greater emphasis on play, as it's a game and not solely an act of inherent artistic expression. For my solo game, I will be simultaneously playing as GM and as a player, letting my dice rolls and intuition guide the story in interesting ways. This also means I'll be playing with both player and GM knowledge. That concept might be confusing at first, especially if you're mostly a player in TTRPGs. You might ask, where's the challenge if I, as a hybrid player and GM, already know all of a monster's weaknesses and all of my character's strengths? Where's the surprise if I already know all of the secrets in a room as the GM and the player? Shouldn't I instead just create elaborate tables of possible encounters and secrets and just let them procedurally build a campaign so I can maintain unexpected surprises and challenges? That last method is interesting, and aspects of it can definitely be incorporated into the kind of game I'm looking to run, but I don't think it's necessary. Keep in mind a golden rule of tabletop role-playing games: don't metagame. While I, as the hybrid GM and player, might know that a monster lurks behind a door, the characters in the game certainly don't. And I don't necessarily know what'll happen if the characters and a monster interact. Will the players survive the encounter? If so, how much of a tough fight will it be? If I hide important objects in a room as the GM, will the player characters find them? I may know they're there as the GM, but it's up to the dice rolls and, depending on character personalities and desires, how thorough those characters are going to be in searching any given area. This style of play is a hard lesson in respecting the divide between player and character knowledge that exists inherently in a TTRPG, whether you're playing on your own or with a group of people. If I let player knowledge influence character knowledge, that's not a very fun game. But if I instead let the characters operate as independent narrative concepts, informed by dice rolls, their backstories and interests, the rules of the game, and some narrative inspiration, then the experience isn't that different from playing a game at a table with other people. Character knowledge isn't the only important factor here. Character concept is as well. A character may not have the knowledge that a monster lies behind a door, but are they even the kind of character who'd approach cautiously and make the appropriate rolls to determine such a thing? Or are they foolhardy and act first and think later? What about role-playing, you might ask? Well, while I'm certainly unlikely to talk to myself in different voices, role-playing still exists here as a concept, though it may not be something that I do in the same way as if I was playing with other people. Role-playing characters in this style of solo play is a little more mechanical, but it still exists and it still tells a story, just not as active and maybe lively as you'd probably get with a bunch of people. Say a character meets an NPC in the game. What kinds of things might they talk about based on their backgrounds and interests? These are things I'll have a sense of based on the backstories and previously established motivations, whether I was playing with another person or on my own. What might the player character be interested in learning from an NPC? How might their initial dispositions toward each other inform the kinds of topics they'd be likely to talk about, and what kinds of roles would even be possible? While this isn't expressly the same as free-form, back-and-forth inspirational role-playing between two people, the rules of just about any TTRPG are as such that the narrative and mechanical frameworks of characters can sort of interact on their own in ways that still tell a story. As you'll recall, my theory for this kind of solo play is to use the rules as written as much as possible. The goal is to be able to play a game simply with a pencil, notebook, rulebook, maybe some character sheets, and dice. But as I'm planning on running this game here on the Infinite Construct, I'm going to make a few unique choices. To start, I'll be using virtual tabletop software, and we'll be using select rulebooks based on some practical considerations. I'm going to run this game in Foundry VTT. This is a personal choice, and this video is not sponsored by Foundry Gaming. I just happen to like the interface and the tools. And it has a downloadable set of Cypher System rules with a ton of resources from the Cypher System reference document ready to go. With some limited exceptions, my game will predominantly use the free resources included in Foundry's Cypher System reference document rule set. This means that a number of resources found in the Numenera Discovery and Destiny rules won't be present in my game, at least not initially. Fortunately, there's enough crossover between Numenera Discovery and the Cypher System reference document that this will still run and feel like a Numenera game. That said, rules, ciphers, and artifacts particularly present in Destiny won't be a part of this campaign for now, as they're a bit more unique. And so for this reason, I'm not going to use characters with the types found in Destiny for now. Instead, I'll be working with the original Glaive, Nano, and Jack types. I'm also going to keep my party on the smaller side with just 3 players. This makes things easier to manage, and it seems like a perfect opportunity to just have all 3 original Numenera types represented in the party. My method of creating characters in Numenera differs a little bit from what you'd get if you followed the outline of Numenera Discovery exactly. And this isn't just an approach I'll take for playing on my own, it's something I do even when I'm playing the Cypher System with other people. Let me illustrate by starting with the party's Glaive. As expected with the Cypher System, we'll start with the character's sentence. I chose to have a swift glaive who bears a halo of fire. Once that's been chosen, I'm now going to jump around a bit in the book to fill out the following categories before I even touch anything mechanical. These are background, connections, and the initial link to the starting adventure. By starting with these 3 concepts, we're foregrounding a narrative structure into this character. So whether playing solo or with a group, sketching out the narrative background of your characters creates synergistic opportunities for interesting stories, relationships, and situations to unfold. In Numenera, each character type has a choice of 3 backgrounds. These are often overlooked in my experience, as they don't technically provide any mechanical information for your character. They're simply narrative considerations for who your character is in this world. For the Glaive, there are 3 backgrounds which are pretty self-explanatory: intensive training, inborn traits, and biomechanical modification. For my Glaive, who I've named Area, I've decided to go with biomechanical modification, meaning that her body is a combination of organic and inorganic parts. All of her strengths come from this modification as she gets more powerful, and she'll do so by upgrading and improving her body. This decision, though it comes with no actual change in numbers or stats for her character, is important in identifying who she is in the 9th world. It's a way to guide her role-playing, as we know she'll always be on the lookout for new and interesting ways to improve her body and what her relationship is to the techno-magical phenomena found in the setting. It also influences the kinds of places she'll be up for exploring as well. This approach is especially important for a solo role-playing game, as Aria's need to improve her biomechanical form serves as a narrative compass when making decisions about where the party is going and how they might interact between one another or with NPCs. With her background out of the way, I'm now going to turn to her connection. I rolled randomly on the chart that appears on page 32 of Numenera Discovery and landed a 16. So Aria has a blacksmith friend who sometimes asks her to help out at the forge for a decent paycheck. Like with Aria's background, we're now learning a little bit more about who she is in this game and in this world. She's had extensive biomechanical modifications done to her body, and she has access to and works at a forge, where she's friendly with the owner. For the next piece of her background, I'm going to flip to her focus, bears a halo of fire. Just before the abilities listed for each focus, you'll see a list of possible connections. I decided to leave this decision up to chance, and so I rolled a d4 on the 4-choice selection, and it decided through a quirk of fate, Aria's fire simply cannot harm one of the other PCs. After this, I'll turn to her descriptor. Like with each focus, each descriptor has a selection of 4 initial links to the starting adventure. For Aria, I chose one of the other PCs convinced her that joining the group would be in her best interest. What that interest is kind of for me to come up with, but based on her background and connections, I can probably start guessing at a few possibilities. So let's go over everything we have for this character. We know that Aria is fast from her descriptor, swift. We know that she's a glaive, or warrior of the Ninth World, whose prowess comes from extensive biomechanical modifications to her body. She also works part-time at a blacksmith, and a member of the adventuring party convinced her that joining the group would be of benefit to her. She also bears a halo of fire, and so has some kind of command over a wild and chaotic force of nature, which for some reason can't harm one of the other characters. So we have Aria's identity. We have some general motivations for her. We know a bit about her relationship to others in the world, and some of her relationship to at least one of the other party members. These are the kinds of things we'll need to successfully role-play this character, and that's whether we're playing with others or, in the case of this video, playing solo. The question as to what she might do in a city in ancient ruin, wandering the vast deserts of the beyond, any such scenario now has a bit more purpose and context for who Aria is and how we might play her. We can imagine scenarios that might be rewarding or challenging for her, and that kind of imagining is key for role-playing. While her stats will be important, as well as the abilities and skills I'll choose for her, establishing this narrative material is essential for seeing her as a character, not just for her class and abilities. But for said stats, I gave her the following: 14 might, 13 speed, 11 intellect. She's trained in initiative, jumping, and running, and has inabilities in balance, as well as all Numenera skills. I chose to focus on her unarmed attack via the no need for weapons ability, and gave her the aggression ability. She also gains Shroud of Flame from her focus. But she has more abilities than this. For every Cypher System character I create, I make it a habit to list the suggested player intrusions as abilities. For the cost of 1 XP, Aria could have an old friend, perhaps the blacksmith from her connection, show up and help her. She can also land an overwhelming assault on a group of enemies with perfect setup, and Weapon Break will cause an enemy's weapon to fail in her favor. Another thing I like to do is list all of the suggested minor and major effects. Like critical hits in other games, minor effects trigger on a 19 on the die, while major effects trigger on a 20. Each focus suggests a pair of these, and you can also find a list of all of the minor and major effects on page 105 of Numenera Discovery. Now, every time I land on a 19 or 20 on the character's roll, I can quickly determine what the positive outcomes might include. Aria's character information and stats are now completed, and I'll go over each character in more thorough detail in a future video, but for now, Aria is joined by 2 other characters: Ealt, a strong-willed nano who works miracles, and Trent, an intelligent Jack who exists partially out of phase. As a Jack, Trent has the School of Hard Knocks background, meaning that they possess some lucky and natural street smarts that have helped them survive. For their connection, Trent was revealed to have once traveled with a group of performers whom they're still on good terms with. They joined up with our party for the sake of discovery, and at one point, Trent's hand passed through one of the other player characters, which remains an awkward moment for both parties. Our nano, Ealt, became a nano through the study of the world's most esoteric and enigmatic secrets. The forbidden knowledge background reveals that she's drawn to continuous, relentless study and mastery of the Numenera, and hailing from distant shores, she's an outsider in the known Ninth World. One of the other party members, though, has learned a deep secret of hers. These are the characters I'll be playing in my game, each with a succinct and understandable set of backgrounds and personal motivations. I'll be leaning on these to make decisions about what these characters might do when they encounter whatever awaits them in the Ninth World, and in the next video in this series, I'll be taking a look at just that, the setting of the Ninth World, to see where I want this story to start and what kinds of themes I'm interested in exploring.